He says, you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a peculiar people. And so that's the New Testament version, kind of, after a way of speaking of this. That God says, it'll be a sign between me and you throughout your generation, that you may know that I am the Lord who sanctifies you, who's called you, who's set you aside, set you apart, who's made you a peculiar people. You are chosen people. And the Sabbath set Israel apart from other nations. The Sabbath was to keep them from assimilating into the surrounding pagan cultures and idolic worship that was going on. And so this sabbatical system, it consisted basically of 3 special times. And we're going to look at those every week, every 7th year, and every 50th year. And so let's take a look. I left my thing over here, so I'm going to have to step over here. Let's take a look. The weekly Sabbath. That was one day in 7 for God's people to rest. We're all pretty familiar with that. In Exodus 23 and 12, God says, 6 days you shall do your work. On the 7th day you shall rest, that your ox and your donkey may rest. How about that? Even the animals need a rest. And the son of your female servant and the stranger may be refreshed. Even the stranger, if there were a stranger visiting at the time, they were also to participate in this rest. And so there's the weekly Sabbath day, every one day in every 7. Then there is the annual Sabbath, which was 1 year in 7, during which the land was to rest from being worked for the benefit of the soil and for the poor as well. Exodus 23, 10 through 11 says, 6 years you shall sow your land and gather in its produce, but the 7th year you shall let it rest and lie fallow, that the poor of your people may eat. And what they leave, the beasts of the field may eat. In like manner you shall do with your vineyard and your olive grove. So even the land needs to be rested. Now what farmers mostly do now, they don't take a whole year off from farming in most cases, but they will recycle the land, so to speak. In other words, what's it called? Where they'll plant something different in a field they had something else in the year before, the last several years. And sometimes, now in some cases, they will, just give that land a rest and then break it back up the next year and things like that. And it works out to their benefit to do these things, to have a type of a cycle and do different things with the land. And even then, God knew this. God knew this was good for the land. So once 1 year out of every 7 years, they were even to give the land a rest. And so then you have what's called the Jubilee Sabbath. That was the climax of the sabbatical system, in which freedom was proclaimed throughout Israel every 50th year. Now, we had a year of Jubilee here a few years ago, but we sing the song right on about the, what's the name of the song that talks about the year of Jubilee all the time? Behold, he comes. And it talks about the year of Jubilee in there. And so, and really, in spiritually speaking, every year should be a year of Jubilee for God's people. It should be a great year of Jubilee, every year spiritually speaking. Now, especially under grace, of course. But that was the climax of the entire sabbatical system. And it was proclaimed all throughout Israel every 50th year. During the year of Jubilee, debts were canceled, prisoners and slaves were freed, and alienated land was returned to the former owners. And all that's in Leviticus 25. We won't go to that because that's from verses 8 all the way through 55 in Leviticus that's covered there. And that one, we're trying to drop off the screen, that one scripture, but it's Leviticus 25, 8 through 55. You can't hardly see anything but the top of it. That's